not far down to paradise. At least it's not for me. And if the wind is right, you can sail away and find tranquility. Oh, the canvas can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me. It's not far to Never Never Land. No reason to pretend. And if the wind is right, you can find the joy of innocence again. Oh, the canvas can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me. Sailing takes me away to where I've always wanted. Just a dream of the wind to carry me. Soon I will be free.
The reason we're doing this, making this videotape, is because the Buffalo Harbor Sailing Club has been in operation for 13 years, and it's grown from an original 8 incorporators, several of whom we have here tonight, to over 300 members. And a lot of people say, well, how did this club ever start? It's so successful. And there are a lot of stories, but nobody knows the full story. So we thought we'd get the original people here tonight and question them and let them talk. And I'd like to introduce the people that are here. And see, the first president was Jerry Malachowski, and he'll be joining us very shortly. But over to my immediate right is Bob Eric, who is the second honorary member of the club, made an honorary member in 1978, and of course we all know him as the skipper of the commune in our wonderful committee boat. Next is Steve Krasinski, who is an original incorporator and probably, I think, the first racer also, you and Jerry, and
Ron
Ron Keynes. And Joe Barnhart from the Mary Hill, who I remember very well, was one of the very first racers and an incorporator, and Bernie Blum, who is also one of the first incorporators. 1977, Bernie, was that, I think, the first. And Deneen Kuhn, who is a member of the club and who is, we're working together on putting this project together. So let's start. We were talking first about the very beginnings of the club, and not even of the club, but how did this racing start? And Steve, you seem to remember that story.
Well, my best recollection was that Jerry Malachowski approached me one day, and it had to be somewhere around 1974, based on what boat I owned at what time. I tell time in my sailing experiences by what boat I owned. As I recall, he had belonged to the Wilson Yacht Club for a few years, and they had Wednesday night racing, so he came down to a small boat harbor. The Erie Basin didn't exist, and some of the other places we have now. That's where we had our boats. He said that he enjoyed racing up there, and that was something we might enjoy here. And I didn't have any idea, what he was talking about. None of us had ever raced. I don't think we had even seen much of racing. America's Cup wasn't anything like it is now, on television and all. So, but he talked me into to racing between a couple of the green cans out in front of the small boat harbor in that area. So it was a fellow by the name of Ron Keynes who had a Shark, Jerry had a Venture 17, and I had a 21, and we being reached back and forth, and that was about it. There was nothing, and then we went back and chatted and all, and it seemed like a good idea. It wasn't all that bad. And then Joe had a boat down there at that time, and we talked, and he joined our group we had 4 then. So over that next winter, we alternated from house to house and formulated the club, and then somehow that next year, we met at Armando's at one point, across from the Ford stamping plant, but
that was a lot later.
That was later.
That might have been later. I don't even worry.
I remember when we first started to race. It was you and I and Jerry and Ron Keynes, and I think there was another boat there, a homemade boat that somebody had built. And we used to go to the desk there, and we'd pay $1. Remember, we had to pay him $1. And he used to go out and start us in that little in the little rowboat or whatever you had. I had a Chris Craft Capri. In fact, it's still racing in the fleet today.
Dick Smith's got
Dick
the boat.
Smith has got it, number
Yeah.
90. I had it that time.
Did you give
And-
yourself handicaps at that time when you were racing, or just boat for boat?
No,
Well,
God, we
Jerry
didn't
gave
have
him a golf handicap.
Well, that's
no handicaps at all.
At first, there weren't any. You know.
No, we didn't have any handicaps. We just went out there and the guy put up a couple of flags and we raced and
He
we
was
ran
from the
a-
small boat harbor, Joe?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I was in the small boat harbor.
So you raced. What did you do?
When we raced,
Yeah.
we just raced around the buoys there and inside the harbor, right, Steve? The
Pretty
black
much behind
can.
the break wall.
Yeah, and then we kind of extended it. We got together and we said, well, let's go up this far and go around this can and that, and go around twice, and we did things like that to make the races longer.
We had no idea that,
No, we
that
didn't
it
know
had
what the
to
hell
be
we were doing.
a triangle and there ought to be a weather leg and all that. We had no idea.
How long were your races, like real short?
Oh, yeah, because the longest one, would, like Joe said, we essentially beam reach back and forth down behind the break wall, so
Yeah.
the guy with the longest boat won. And it'd be, someplace in front of the small boat harbor to the buoy out in front of the Erie Basin. Of course, the Erie Basin Marina hadn't yet even been thought of being built, and back, and that was it, And then after a while, it became more adventurous. Let's go out in the lake,
Right.
We had heard about people who actually sailed out in the lake, and we thought, let's give that a try.
I think it was 74 when we actually started the race.
And then you raced 75 with 5 or 6 boats, the boats that you're
Yeah.
talking
It
about.
gradually built.
But you met, actually, you started meeting during that winter, right after you had raced.
In our respective homes.
So you
type of
sort of
thing.
felt that you ought to have a club at that point?
It seemed like this might be something other people would enjoy. I mean, I don't know that we aspired to anything. It was not like, we're going to make this, develop a big club and there's going to be hundreds of people, and it wasn't like that at all. It was just a matter of something we saw some pleasure in doing with our boats, and maybe if we had more people, then it would be a little, there'd be more activity, and that type.
Somebody else to beat.
Somebody else.
I know some of our first meetings when we had about 10 or 15 people, we said, boy, if we can only get 20 guys or 25, we got it made. We'll have a club.
Yeah.
And we did, and then it kept growing and growing, as you well know.
I said, this is Jerry Malachowski, who is the first president of the Buffalo River Sailing Club, but we haven't even gotten to that part yet. We're talking about the very early
Yeah.
days of when you all went out to race.
Down in front of the tower at the Erie Marine Basin and having kind of a pre-race meeting. I think it was a sign posted and everybody who was interested in racing ought to get together. We didn't know anybody. We and I just showed up and they said, we're going to race. I think it was the first race, I think it was just about the end, I don't know, it was the end of the 77 season. But we ended up going out to Waverly and back. At that point, I think it was a Portsmouth handicap.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know when that was instituted. But
How
that,
did you do that? Let's get into that.
I think Bob Barnhart heard something about it, and he got an address and wrote for the information. And he brought it in, and we kind of compared it with our own little, kind of a system. And it was similar, but I think it was a little bit more, it was just one step closer to being a perf rating. As I recall, you had the 3 different wind speeds.
Yeah, there were, here's one race with the Portsmouth in 1978, a fleet list here. There was the ratings at 0 to 4, 4 to 12, and 12 to, what is that, 50? Yeah. Them were the ratings we got. And the idea was even in the middle of the race, if the wind died or picked up, they would go to these ratings, right? Steve, I think you were doing the
Try
race.
to identify the average wind velocity that evening.
Right.
We take turns being committee
Are
boat
you
back
there?
then.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
there. Yeah, there you are.
yeah, Jack Mathias with Cannonball. But I think that was really when things started to get a little more serious.
Yeah,
and
that's
when
right,
I
it
think
did, yeah.
Let me see that map, Joe.
Well, when you started the set, I'm still back at you raced in 74, very
74.
informally around the cans, and then you had meetings during that winter. And then you all came out again in 75
Right.
and started racing, still sort of inside the harbor?
Right.
In '75, I think we started reaching out a little bit. We were actually out in the lake. At that time, I remember we organized 4 committees.
Yeah, I
You
had some
have that?
notes like that.
Yeah, I think you
One
got
of
them there,
committees.
We
Steve.
had a race course committee, a
Yeah.
rating committee.
A race,
I
that's
gave,
right.
I gave Bet a
75.
copy of
I
that.
think, yes.
Yeah. And then how many boats do you think you had at that time, in 75?
It was in the teens, I believe.
Really?
I think it was about 15, 20.
Did people just come out to race, or did they call you up, or how did they find out who you were?
Well, all of a sudden they'd come on the course and, they'd
They would
race.
show-
They
would
didn't have
show
to.
up. I don't know.
We did-
We talked to each. There were a few of us that knew each other with sailboats, and as soon as you've gotten maybe 5 or 6 people, one of those knew the other guy
Yeah.
down at dock and would chat with him, and somebody might have a buddy who sailed with that guy, so that's his crew, and word just spreads, somewhat like the club has built now.
Did anybody use spinnakers that early?
Oh no,
So this was.
oh no,
It was
That's
very
another-
informal then, no members.
we didn't own any. It wasn't a
Did
matter
you
of.
have
What a big
dues?
difference.
Did you have any dues in 75?
No, I don't think
Just
there were
that.
dues. I think
We
if
should-
anything, we put a buck or 2 in a can just to pay Katana
That's
to be the
right.
committee boat.
Yeah.
That was about it. But I can recall, here's something and this is quite a bit later, to give you an idea of dues structure. December 8th, 1977,
1978.
we have established committees. At this point in time, Jerry was president, Tom Johnson vice president, Hank Ridzik secretary, and I was treasurer. But at the bottom, it struck me as to be real funny here because single page of minutes, that's it. It says full membership is $25 for the season, and partial payments are gladly accepted.
We didn't
And we
worry.
had an associate membership of $5. That's it.
And the Burgee and the incorporation, then, when did that come into play?
Oh, Burgee, that was like,
We had a couple
Yeah.
meetings.
Look at
that
that.
was tougher than deciding to do anything else. Incorporating that took about a nanosecond. The Burgee, that took about 5 or 10 meetings, maybe took the whole season, who knows? We had people submitting ideas that were just, it was incredible. More discussion, there was like this, all this publicity, or this the stuff on the Thomas
Clearance.
I'll tell you,
hearings.
if you want to hear something real good, I should read this to you. It's one of the first newsletters that went out, I think. And it was with one of our early designs here, you can see it. And belay sailors and brethren of the cloth, that's sailcloth,
Yeah.
and members of the Buffalo Harbor Sailing Club. Captain Bill Carey, as chairman of the nominating committee, summons all members to the annual election of officers. So. And appointed last meeting, Captain Art Carey, Bob Barnett, and Dudley Buck. The meeting was held at Armando's at December the 8th, 1977. The meeting will be open for nominations to the floor, elect president, vice president, and so forth. Following election will be some slides of the past year and a movie on the arrival and departure of the Christine Radish sailing vessel. Now, here's something down here that Bill wrote. As a reminder, at the last meeting, we discussed increasing the dues payable in installments to $25. The thought behind this was twofold. We would not have to collect more money during the season to operate. 2, we discussed incorporating, and this was twofold. First, we would qualify for Lake Erie racing, and second, when cruising, we could be accepted as a club. Concerning accommodations, where we may choose to stop and visit. To be discussed at the December 8th meeting. Now, here, this was a thing, so he didn't have enough paper, so he wrote up here in the column, see?
Carey.
See? I hear by the grapevine that someone has found someone to make our Burgee for about $6. Now, all we have to do is adopt one more at the meeting. And that was when we had this one, Jerry, remember that?
Right.
You know, it was the lighthouse and had Buffalo Harbor Sailing Club.
Well, I noticed when I was looking through the old newsletters that the Burgee changed
Oh,
every
yeah, it
time.
did,
So,
yeah.
so did you vote on it? Did you
Well,
just
yeah.
try it out for the newsletters, or?
Then this
Oh, that's
came
another
up,
one.
you know. And then I remember that we put this on to represent a sail, that slash line. Remember that?
Yes.
Guys, remember the slash line?
Had something to do with a sail plan.
Yeah, with a sail
Was
plan.
that, was it Tony Metcalf who came up with the idea? It came up from the bottom corner, and the buffalo was stuck in there. And I said, well, why don't we just take the stripe and hang it from the top down?
Oh, and that's how it happened?
Yeah, this is
So
a
that's
very,
the one
very
I have
poor
now.
illustration,
Yeah.
but just very, very simply, the slash line across the typical Burgee shape, and then later, to symbolize again the sail plan, and then later we added the buffalo.
Do you remember that buffalo?
But it took a while to get to that.
Yeah.
As Joe says, there were at one point here we had, we thought we might use the lighthouse.
China Lake.
The China Lake that's right out here at the Coast Guard base, and he's got BHSC there showing along the side. So there was a lot of give and take before we finally settled on the Burgee that we currently fly.
You know something I remember about that? The first buffalo they put in here, they copied from the sabers. Now, if you ever look at that buffalo, he's got his legs bent back. He looks like he had broken legs. Remember that, Jerry?
Looks like he's
We
running.
said, that buffalo, we got to get a buffalo that looks like a buffalo standing up, you know.
So you
And
did
somebody
here.
finally drew a buffalo. I don't know who it was.
And that's the Burgee we're using now, which is a nice Burgee.
Yeah,
You know, I think
really?
you guys did, after you finally got it going, I mean, it's lasted.
Well, the original slash was to let everybody know we were a sailing club, you know.
But you did it by committee. You did it
Yeah,
by
pretty
committee.
much. Everybody had their input, you know.
What
So-
about the marks? What did you use for marks in those days? I mean, beyond the cans, the navigation, did you put in any marks?
Why don't you tell them
Well-
about the marks that we built?
Yeah, at one point, we recognized that the government boys just didn't suit us. As we learned more about sailboat racing, we realized that the first leg ought to be a weather leg, and then the appropriate triangle should follow. And we found difficulty with the government marks. The wind didn't always come from the same direction as you would like it to, so we had to do some things. Ideally, would like to put marks out every race. Obviously, you don't have time in the evening to do that. So we opted for the second best alternative, and that was to fabricate some stationary marks, and we had to seek permission from the Coast Guard.
Corps of Engineers, too.
And the Corps of Engineers, following all the,
That's it.
and we have all the documentation.
Yeah, look at that.
Joe saved over the years. Shows the location of the marks. I see Jerry's signature down there, and
I think that was that 5 mark deal, wasn't it? One in the middle and then 3 or 4 around, and we were going to start in the middle, and then we could race to something like the canoe club had up there. You know?
exactly.
That's when we learned
That
how
was our-
difficult it was to keep a mark in Lake Erie.
Yeah, that's
You go
when we
out 1
learned.
week and then something would be gone.
And we put these things together with ground tackle was rope. We used nylon, and we thought we had sufficient weight down and all. And I can recall that particular year. I don't remember. It doesn't say when that was when we first initiated
No,
this.
I know, it doesn't
There's no
say.
date on this thing.
No, April 77.
77,
Oh, is it?
April, okay. July of that year, we must have had the most horrendous 4th of July. It was a period of about 4 days where it blew incessantly. Churned that lake up something awful. Wednesday night we went out and they were all gone. All
And-
4 marks were
And we
gone.
had one of our best engineers at Moog design them, and he said, Dick said, oh, these things will never, they'll last out there for 1,000,000 years. They lasted 1 week, didn't they? And we built them at the plant, too. Remember those?
You built them at the plant?
Yeah, over at Moog, we built them.
On your lunch
We
hour.
had-
No, it was all after hours. All
And
the
a
gym
lunch
just
hour.
used it was a place to gather, to do the work. But, so then we realized how ferocious Lake Erie can be, and then we were more conservative in our next approach and went with use of the government buoys and a single mark that we put out to try and create a triangle, and of course we still put one in essentially the same direction, position.
What were the
What
marks
was
made
that
of?
made of?
The first
Well,
one?
those,
They were stainless steel canisters.
Oh,
they
the
were all Freon cans is what they
Freon
were.
cans, yeah.
That's part of the reason we worked at Moog. They
Stainless
had-
steel,
They would discard these stainless steel drums, so obviously they wouldn't corrode, so they seemed like a good building block for that purpose. And then we used some foam that we bought, I can't recall where, and tube, center tube, and with weights on the bottom to keep the thing upright and all. But that was essentially it. I don't even recall what we used for ground tackle weight anymore, but they just didn't hold up. They were gone. So then we went with full chain, solid chain, heavy-duty anchors, and
Hi, Tom.
brake shoes.
Now we have Tom Johnson. I guess and Tom is our second president of Buffalo Harbor Sailing Club. And Tom, we've discussed a lot about the beginning, so we want to get some of your memories too. When did you first join the club? Do you remember that?
About the middle 70s, I think. That was pretty much the time
You were one of the
were-
first racers?
Well, my dad and I were. My dad was one of the, under his
Remember
name, with
Russ.
his O'Day Mariner 19, which was our big hot boat at that time. Some of the things I remember was that the way that the whole club formed was very, very loose, and it sort of kept that way till now, till the present day. I don't think there's a lot of real tightness in the club as far as the people involved in that, and I think that's probably one of the things that makes it such a neat club. And everyone is allowed to do their own thing, and I think our collisions and protests are probably down to a minimum. The thing about people in that, we had some people come into the club, and we all remember who maybe the people were in the original part of it. But there was people like Chuck Chilcott, and I don't want to embarrass Bob, but I think the day that those two gentlemen came into the club were great for us, because Bob, for unknown reasons, always handled all the committee boat end of it, and Charlie, just with his computer background, was very much a force in the club, and is to this day. Another thing.
Did they have collisions and protests then, when they started out?
I can't remember too many collisions.
No.
Protests, I don't think we knew what a
we
protest
didn't.
was.
Just yell at each
Yeah,
other, that's
yeah.
all. Hey, you're not
I
supposed to
think
do.
Bernie was was he one of the original protest people?
I think you were. Bernie was.
I think, Tom's talking about breakthroughs for the club. One of the real breakthroughs was figuring out that we could put the committee boat behind the wall on Wednesday nights, so that if it was windy, we could still run a series, or we could still run a race, because to send the committee boat on an early rough night, that was the thing. Well, what do we do? We finally answered, keep the committee boat behind the wall, start the race behind the wall.
Was that with Bob in '78?
That could have been right about that.
That's
Bob, do you remember?
When was that, Bob?
According to these sheets here, the first time I must have done it was in '76.
Oh, my goodness.
But I didn't do it all the time, and that was just, I did it for Bill Carey and Bill Tran.
And Bill
Clipper
Tranchell
26.
got you out there too?
Well, Bill Carey's boat was a little boat, and he said he has to start the races. It was on a Sunday then, too. They had Sunday races. And he said, would you take me out? And I didn't know what the hell they were doing. So I said, sure. So we went out, we anchored, and he did all the stuff, flags.
Before you really came on board, what we used to do is
Everybody took a turn.
took a turn, like you'd go out there your night and you'd start them,
And at this point in time,
Yeah.
it wasn't even a requirement that you have numbers on your sails or
No.
anything. We all knew each other.
We all knew each
You
other.
recognized, there weren't, I don't think we had a duplicate of any particular boat.
No, I don't
So it
think
wasn't
there
a
was.
problem to identify the boats, here comes Joe Barnhart, okay, get his time, okay.
Yeah, I
fine.
don't think there was two
So
boats the
then
same.
the committee boat were the people, they were the ones that figured out
part
the
of the
rating
race,
and but then they figured out the rating and said who won from the Portsmouth?
Yeah, well, we'd just go down to somebody's boat, and whoever was the committee boat guy that night, he used his sailboat initially, and you just went back down and did it by hand.
Oh,
And then hand calculators, somebody bought a calculator, and that was pretty nice.
And somebody had a spinnaker, a couple of boats. Didn't you have a spinnaker?
I had one after a while, I bought a Capri,
Yeah, and.
and it had one. Portsmouth, that rule, that system attempted to compensate boats for not having a spinnaker.
Right.
And oftentimes our courses were never set up.
Well, in 78 here, we had spinnakers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
with
then
the right
finally
leg,
we
but
broke them down.
No, I mean, I'm just looking at the boats.
Yeah, but I don't think we broke them down in 78. That, we used
No,
to
we had-
race.
No.
A and B, A1, A2, and the B1,
Yeah.
B2. I've got that.
Yeah, that
listed
began to start, the point that Tom made, I think is what's coming out of this discussion, and he said that the power of this club was the fact that it was open to suggestions. If something didn't seem to be working too awfully well, and somebody seemed to have a better idea, let's try that. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Gee, we didn't know much about racing. Well, if somebody had a spinnaker who could use it, we tried to penalize him for that. We thought that would probably make his boat faster, and there was some attempt at penalizing that potential for speed. But we really didn't do it very well, and it maybe didn't work all that well. But we tried for a while, and then we recognized there are people that are unhappy with that. And then somebody said, you know what, I heard about a system that might be better than that. And then eventually migrated to this perfect.
It's interesting, in 78, in the newsletter, it talks about a haul-out race where you used the Portsmouth rule and used a perf rule for comparison. So
Yeah.
you sort of scored both ways.
Right.
And then,
yeah.
I guess during the winter, I'm just inferring, did you then decide to adopt perf? Because in 79 then, Tom, it was perf.
Well, that's what we used,
Yeah.
yeah.
See, now, this meetings that I have here, the 76 meeting, which I think was the first real organized meeting, where we laid out what you had to have, and we had a race course committee, a rules committee, and it's even here, the name of the club. We decided on the name of the club that night. Buffalo Harbor Sailing Club, 16 votes. Niagara Frontier Sailing Club, 2 votes. And Harbor Sailing Club, 2 votes.
First, when did you start becoming the official committee boat now? Do you remember?
Well,
I just had a race result here on September 24th of 78. That's this Bob Erie gets the committee boat.
78.
Yeah.
Which would jive with the fact that you were made an honorary member in 78.
Right.
So that's incredible. 13 years. So really from the beginning of the incorporation of the club then, all the way through, you've been the committee boat.
Just about. We
Wow.
incorporated in
We're still
78.
trying to figure out why. Determine that one of these days.
He loves it, that's right, Bob?
Oh, we love him.
It's the money I make.
That's
Yeah.
that'd be it.
That bucka.
Listen, and nowadays it would be good.
Yeah, now it wouldn't be bad, right?
Was the first women's race a stem off of this grouping? Like, did somebody's wife or somebody decide to start the women's voting, or?
I don't, now you're gonna have, I don't
Good
think,
look at the
Wasn't Pat pretty
minutes.
much involved in that?
How about Tom? It was during your reign, sort of.
Yeah, it
Was
started when I was
79?
Commodore, and I remember that we had to make up fleet flags. Do you remember the fleet flags that we had? The first year, they were just sewn up. All the wives got together and sewed them up. I think Pat was sort of leading that along. And then I know the last year I was in, we had a white flag with a picture of our lighthouse on it. And that was the flag that was used during the China Light. But that started out, we were surprised, I think the men were surprised how many people were in that. I gotta watch myself with Anita and that nowadays, with how many women actually raced. And at that time, it had to be a total female crew. You couldn't have any men on board.
But you should remember, because I think you started, you must
I
have been one
did,
of the
but
first.
I didn't
Yeah.
start it. You told me that there was a women's race on a Sunday afternoon, and I got together some of my friends, and we went, and I was nervous.
Because that was still with the Cal, so.
It
that
was,
had to
it
be
was,
early.
it was
One of the
70,
guys
it was
involved?
79.
I remember that. My wife raced in a few races. But, Tom, you could have, I remember I was down in the cabin
Yeah.
sweating it out. You could have a man on
But he had to be
board.
below
But he
decks.
had to be
But he had to be
below
below
You
deck.
couldn't do it. And
Yeah,
you
he couldn't
put
do
If
it
you had a
in.
man, he had to be below decks.
Yeah, and
So
I
in the-
remember I was below decks a couple of times sweating out my wife because you came about this close to somebody,
But there, it says that there were 15 boats, and I do remember
Yeah.
that there were
Yeah.
quite a few boats
Yeah,
in there.
I remember we were surprised how many boats there were.
And that was just in '79, I think there was just one race,
Yep.
and then I think the next year then we went to Sunday it was a Sunday afternoon, but then there were several. There were
Yeah.
3, I think, on Sunday
I think there
afternoon.
was one each series.
Oh, that's
next
what it
year,
was.
yeah. And they were always on Sundays.
About it.
Was it part of China Light? I mean, with the discussion, the land acquisition and getting China Light have something to do with?
I think the
call
only,
it
we had our beacon and our lighthouse on the flag, I remember, because I have about 2 of those flags left. They're real neat flags. China Light evolved later on. That was not called that originally.
The talk about the land acquisition and
The way I remember that a committee was, we asked that a committee be formed to look for land, and there were 2 purposes that this committee was looking for land. One was to possibly have a clubhouse for the club. The other one was to maybe get slips for the club members. That committee found the land where the China Light is right now.
Penn Central had a number of parcels of property in and around the Buffalo metropolitan Buffalo area that they would like to sell, and one of them just happened to be on the ship canal, Buffalo Ship Canal, and wondered if that might not be a good thing to grab up. And Bob having been a part of the Powerboat Club, what do they call it?
Motorboat.
Motorboat Club.
Yeah.
The old that Joe belonged to, was probably, dear in his mind that that type of thing with the camaraderie and just to have a place of your own kind of thing. I guess it was secure, and my recollection was that's the first I heard about an actual piece of property, and then we started to look into that, and I can remember Dick Hart and Bob Barnhart and myself making trips. Down to City Hall. How we found out about this particular piece of property that the China Light Club is on was an offshoot of the railroad property, which we never did buy.
And we're supposed to get into a deal with RCR, who's going to buy the full 11, sell us 3, and somehow that didn't work. They were going to have 2 deals, and then the railroad didn't want 2 deals, they just wanted 1 deal. And then you
But
guys stumbled on this
in the
other
process of that all happening, we went to the City Hall to identify the tax burden on these parcels. That was going to be something we had to know if we were going to get into this. And in looking at that, we found that the city had the adjacent piece of property, and they didn't know whether they wanted to sell it or not. We made inquiries, and before we knew it, we bought it for $7,000, as I recall.
So you actually bought it from the city?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was delinquent.
And then we went in there and cleared it and bought
It was a
ourselves-
shambles. There was 150 piers and pilings underwater.
Right.
That was the biggest part of the expenditure, was the removal of all that
Yeah.
material.
There was apparently a dock back in the 20s, docking area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
the
course, it was
railroad used to
originally
go.
conceived as a club project, but then the
No,
club...
I don't really think it was.
It was always just a group of people that
Yeah,
wanted...
I don't.
We
really-
approached the-
We
We
approached
talked
the
about it
club
very
and said
early
if
on, very
anybody
early on.
wanted to, but I don't think it was actually a club.
There were a lot of people
It
weren't
started out
interested
that
in
way.
it.
Yeah, they weren't
They
interested.
did not want to get involved in this.
They
Well,
didn't
let's just get a small.
You know,
And the
one
purpose
thing,
of the club was really to foster racing.
Well, that's
I think
right.
That was the decision, is to keep it pure
Right.
and to keep it in that framework.
Sure.
one thing I think when we first formed the club, we saw what the other clubs had evolved to. The people didn't really get out there and race, and they were kind of social clubs after a while. And we said, we don't want something like that. We want something that's strictly racing, and we don't want to own any land or anything like that. Just have enough to put on the races. At the end of the year, we were supposed to be flat broke and start again, And that really was the concept of this club, not to own anything, just to serve the racing public only. Anybody that wanted to race.
First trophy dinners.
Tom used to get up and tell funny stories.
I
We
remember
missed it.
I thought we went into the GAF Awards.
1980.
Yeah, we got all those awards.
No, it was earlier than that. I think the first one must have been after the '77 season. I've got in this pile, I saw the results of the 1978 dinner where we had a tremendous turnout of 80 people.
Yeah.
Wow.
It always was up around that. Even when we started out, we had, like 35 racers.
We had those at the yacht club, was that?
I think we
the
did
first-
at the yacht club.
Yeah, I
The
think we
first
did.
ones, and then it
Right.
moved around.
Got too big to be at the yacht club.
I remember Tommy used to give out about 5 awards, remember crazy awards? I still got one home.
I
The
do.
bye-bye award with the
We got
hand.
lots of them. We got a number 3, we
Couple
got a
of them.
green
I don't
brick
know
on
what
a
the hell
green
it was
rock. I don't know
for
what it's
anymore,
for.
We had the Luck of the Irish Award
Is that
for
what it was?
something. When Bob Erie was so excited because it looked like one summer there was going to be 100 boats racing. Bob, I remember that you would say we had 98 or we had 99. Do you remember when that was, when we got 100?
Oh, that's got to be about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably more.
The most we've had now is 128 one night.
Wow.
That were out on the course.
Is that the most we ever had, Bob? I don't know.
At one time on the course.
Yeah.
In comparison to now, was the weather stormier or windier or more severe or anything? Like they're saying now we have a
I think there were a
Mild
period,
or something.
I think there were a period of years,
Oh, it was very
you guys could, where it was, every
Really-
time you went out, it was coming over the break wall.
Really severe.
Every time you went sailing, it was over the wall. And in the period of the late 70s and early 80s, it was always very windy in the
Yeah.
summer. You
Right.
get a period, and you get a period of, as we said, that 4th of July weekend that one year, where it blew for like 4 days. You couldn't even leave the slip.
Right.
And on Tuesday, you finally settled down enough. Tuesday, Wednesday, you could go out, actually go sailing, because it was so heavy. We don't see that kind of weather anymore.
It was relatively common to see green water coming over the break wall.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, they would have been
I think
higher
the
lake
weather was-
levels, or?
More-
No, I think
Well, it has fairly small.
I don't think the winds have been as strong the last few years. I think
Well, this
we're in a
year's the
period-
strongest I think we've had.
Is it the last few years?
The only difference is this year, a lot of our wind was from the other direction.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we had an east wind a lot this
Do
year.
it?
Yeah, you're right.
We have records of the winds for each race?
No.
It might be interesting to see how it,
I can remember we were, a lot of our members were involved in restoring the lighthouse, and we got to really know the Coast Guard guys real well, and they used to always grumble because the Wednesday night races, they'd go out and they'd have to follow the fleet around, and their guys are getting seasick, because there was some terrible weather
Yeah.
situations, I remember.
Does the measuring of the boats come along with the perf, or did that come later? Isn't that where they had?
Yeah, that
Later.
was driven
Yeah.
by Lake Erie Perf. Steve
Yeah.
Strong's group dictated that we measure the sails and the boats for that.
Steve
and
was
just
the
in
early
compliance.
measurer and
Yeah.
ran all that.
Handicapping and measuring, and then the club grew to a size where obviously I needed some help. In the spring, it became too much to try to prepare your own boat and then run around
Everybody else.
and measure at the same time. You know, the free time you had was typically the weekends and that, so. But yeah, that was
Who
driven
were
by
your
numbers.
helpers in there?
Oh my goodness, I can't remember. It wasn't a significant point.
I think Gallagher was in that, and so was Bill Tranchell for a while.
Oh, could well be,
Yeah.
you know, because the club wasn't that big, so the same names, appear all the time.
Yeah, they appear.
You know, you did multiple things.
Well, take a look at the list and see who's still members. You got a lot of them. Jonathan Anner. You had a list, where's that?
Look at
That-
You
that-
had that one, the small list.
Here, there's 77 here, yeah.
Okay,
Read that off.
read that off. I don't know about an R. Adams, Jonathan Anner still racing. Joe, you're around, Bob Barnhart,
Yeah.
myself, Boble, no. Dudley Buck is still racing, except he had a Cal 25. Bill, of course, died, but Art's still racing. Don Gallagher's gone. He's not racing with us anymore. Dave Hadley, is Dave Hadley still racing?
No,
He
he
quit.
sold his boat, yeah.
Okay.
He set the
Art,
marks
yeah.
the last regatta.
Johnson
Did he?
Yeah.
That's nice.
and Jerry.
Kane's, I don't know, is he around anymore? Ron Kane?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't know.
And let's see, Charlie Nowak, is that the same guy that has Eagle?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Hank Smith, Bob Stoner came and went, Paul Weigel, Bill Tranchell died, so you still got about 50% of the people that were racing in 77 are still
Lynn
racing.
Trenchell
yeah.
then will still come
Quite
a
out
few.
occasionally.
So that's a
when
pretty
she's,
good, it's a lot of longevity.
That's right, it is.
Well, one of the things that I did as PR chairman this year was to write to the clubs around the area, excuse me, not the clubs, the magazines in the nation, and ask them if anybody knew of any club that brought over 100 boats to the starting line every Wednesday night. And no one, so far, knows of anyone. I got a letter today that said Honolulu gets a lot of boats out on Wednesday night, and I'm going to check that. But I just didn't know whether you all were aware of that fact, because you know, you have your Cleveland Race Week and Block Island and all that, but it's a very concentrated period of time. And this is a consistent thing that's going on. And I just wanted, do you realize what you guys started, and are you happy about it? I mean, we're very proud of you. But.
Does anyone know how the first Sportsman of the Year award was conceived and what the parameters were to start there?
That was
more
boat of the
current,
year?
but-
I mean, the boat of the year was...
Or even
I
vote of the
think
year.
that comes more into the Chuck
Into the-
Chilcott.
Right.
Yeah, I think
When
later
Was there a
on.
things
vote of
get
the year during
considerably
your
more.
time?
No.
No awards
Yeah,
like that?
was
The Sportsman,
probably in the 80s.
Sportsman of the Year award come from the Yacht Racing, U.S. Yacht Racing Association, and Hooper was instrumental in getting that, because he got all their literature and he knew about that. And if I'm not mistaken, they donated the trophy or something to
That's
different
right.
clubs.
But you had no, during your time, you had no big general award that you gave, right?
Tom gave me an award once.
Yeah.
I got a trophy home in 1981. It says it's the Commodore's Award.
Oh,
Really?
see?
Oh, how
There
nice.
it is.
Yeah, the
Maybe
only,
that was the first Sportsman.
Yeah.
Well, that was another thing that made this club powerful, was that we accommodated anybody.
that's right.
So long as you had a boat, the only requirement we had, it had to be somewhat of an offshore boat. It had to have a self-bailing cockpit and a means of propulsion. And other than that,
Yeah,
it didn't have to fit any rules.
no, that's right.
You could come out.
Well,
Yeah, anyway.
last year we had that fella down from the sail loft, North Sail Loft in Toronto, German fella, forget what his name
Hans
is. Yeah, and he was talking to Joanne and I after the meeting, and he said, I do these things all over, the yacht clubs all over the country, he said. I never been at a place where you discussed having your regatta, and everybody says, yep. He said, well, we're gonna have that other one. He said, yep. He said, normally they say, we would like to have this. Does everybody, can we get enough people to agree on this? And they, well, what are you gonna do to the parking? And is that gonna affect the restaurant? And he says, here, everybody just said, yeah, we're gonna have it. That's it.
We'll figure it out somehow when we get there.
He couldn't quite understand that. But then he had to realize, we don't own any club, we
That's
don't
it.
have any dinners.
No restaurant or...
Why did you incorporate? That's what.
I think it was to get the USIRO insurance. That was the big thing because of
course.
our racing
Yeah.
insurance. And they had a $1 million plus another $1 million umbrella. And it was, the insurance was very, very reasonable through the USIRO.
Which we still use, of course.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, that's
I think it was
wonderful.
$200 a year or something, very, very reasonable amount. But we had to, in order to get it, we had to incorporate it, and that was probably the biggest reason.
So you're pleased with the direction of the club, with all these numbers, or?
Yeah, it's something that you can you start out with a club where you knew everybody's name. You know a lot of people now anyway, but it seemed to be a lot more personal, and it's gotten to be this big thing, but you can still feel comfortable. So you're not just a number. You can even find, I think it has evolved to the point where the club is like a collection of groups, not so much as like like each little group is more like the club used to be, or the whole club used to be in 1976. You get all the J24 racers get together,
Yeah.
and the M3 fleet gets together, and so on.
Each
And,
fleet is more like the club
like the
was.
club used to be years ago. And I think
Yeah.
that the flavor is there in a different way. It's like a series of clubs, small clubs all together, and that's what's nice about
It's
it.
kind of interesting.
Well, one of the keys to the success of the club, as you pointed out earlier, was the fact that if somebody has a good idea and enough people want to do it, they go with it. And because of that, there hasn't been the fragmentation that might otherwise
Right.
occur.
Yeah, something's preventing it, obviously.
Yeah.
Don't want to overanalyze it, right?
Yep,
Just-
exactly. That's a
that
good
was
point.
the-
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is.
That's a
The
good
club, the nucleus of the club, and you can look around here, not entirely, was probably a bunch of pragmatic engineers who looked at things that way, never mind the BS, this, can you do it? If you can't do
Yeah.
it, let's just do it.
Right.
And that may
That
very
was
well.
very obvious in the early going, that
Right.
people just said, let's do it, let's just do it. What would happen if we did this, what happened if we did that? Well, this is closer to what we want, let's do it. And then, even though it might have been obvious, we still voted to make sure that everybody was covered. And then if there were objections, we still talked about it. And sometimes the course didn't wind up being at 050, it wound up being 040 instead, but it was still in the same direction. It was like, it was almost always a consensus.
And we made it, I
Both of us.
know, I can recall making a specific effort to just do what made the majority happy. We actually talked about that.
Yeah.
You can almost see now, too, that as the club grows now, that some of the kids are coming in and they're becoming very active and will move into officer positions and that this could be something that will last forever. It just keeps on going.
Tell you that the present board is really very pleased that you guys decided to come here tonight. I know the membership will be too, because you're our history, and it's fabulous to talk to you. I mean, you can tell you